Welcome to Lesson 8, Getting to Know Layers. In this lesson, you're going to see some fundamental tips and tricks that you can take advantage of when you're using Photoshop CS4 and you're working with layers. Layers are used to create composites, retouch items. There's all sorts of things that you can take advantage of layers for, especially when you're trying to maintain your original information and yet do some retouching work. So in this example, like I said, I'm going to show you just some basic layer techniques that you can use. I am creating, first of all, a new Photoshop file, and I'm making sure that the background is transparent. Press OK, and here we go. Now, first of all, here's my layers panel, and it's got all sorts of things in here that I'll just review quickly as we go through. But I've started out with a layer, not a background. And that was because I told Photoshop I wanted a transparent background. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and create a shape. And in this case, I'll just make a rectangle. And I'm going to choose a color, red. And I'm just pressing Option, or actually I'm on a Vista system, so I'm pressing Alt, backspace, or if you're on a Mac, you can press Option Delete, and that is the quick key for fill my selection with my foreground color. Now I'm going to change the name of this, and this is really critical. A lot of people start working in layers and then let them stay with the name Layer 1, copy of Layer 1, copy of Layer 2, Layer 3, and then all of a sudden there are 20 layers and you don't have a clue where anything is. So it's a really good idea to get in the practice of naming your layers, and this one is going to be called something really unique and different, red square. Okay, so now I want to create a new layer, but I just finished telling you that you should name your layers. If I just click on the new layer icon, I simply get Layer 1 again. What if I want to name that as I'm creating it? If I hold down my Alt or Option key and click on the New Layer button, it brings up the dialog box so that I can come in here and type yellow circle. And guess what I'm going to draw? First of all, select deselect or Control D or Command D. Take the elliptical selection tool, and then in this case, I want to draw a circle from the inside of the square. So I am holding down my Alt and my Shift key, and voila, comes from the center. Switch my color to a yellow and think hard. What was it? Alt backspace or Option delete. Now, this is on a separate layer. Of course, I'm going to create one more before I go any further. I'm pressing Control D, or you can choose Select None. I'm going to create a third layer, and this one is called Green Square. And by the way, if it helps, you can help identify layers by also applying a color to them, and you'll see that appears off to the left. Now in this case, I'm going to make a rectangle, and maybe I want to pull this from the center too, so Alt Shift or Option Shift pulls it from the center, and then I choose a green, Alt Backspace or Option Delete. Now I'm going to make sure I deselect. Another big issue. Sure, you can understand how to use layers, but what if you need to start moving these around? Now, I'm taking my Move tool, and I want to move the red square. Boop, oops. You know, I just had this selected, and I forgot. Oh, by the way, I misspelled that. Unfortunately, the Layers panel doesn't do a spell check. But the reason I showed you that is because typically that is an issue that comes up. You think you're moving something, but actually you have the wrong layer selected. How you can correct that is one of two easy ways. One is that you can get in the habit of holding down your Control key when you go to select something. And you'll notice that by holding down my Control or my Command key on the Mac, it turns on temporarily something called Auto Select. Now, Auto Select can also be turned on in the options under when you have your Move tool selected. The problem with that is sometimes you don't want it on. So I prefer just to hold down the Control or Command key and turn it on when I want it on, because otherwise you might try to select something behind something else and it keeps selecting the wrong object or layer. Now, next thing that I want to show you is that you can also right-click on the Windows machine or that would be Control click on the Mac. And that brings up your contextual menu, and it shows you all the layers that are intersecting exactly where you right-clicked. So I can choose red square layer now. If I right-click over here, I only see that one. Now I see 2 or 3. So another way for quickly selecting layers. Now, other things that you can do as you're working in here, let's say that you want to move a layer up or down. Of course, you can click and drag, and you'll see a bar up here when your layer is actually getting moved so that you can rearrange the position of these. Now, other things that you can do, you'll notice that I am pressing, well, you can't really notice it. I will tell you that I am pressing Control right bracket or Control left bracket. And if you remember in some of the previous videos, I was showing you how when you're on the brush tool, you can hit the right bracket and left bracket to make your brush size larger or smaller. It's the same bracket. It's the brackets off to the right of the letter P. But when I'm on the move tool and I hold down my Control or Command key and hit the left or right bracket, I can easily move up or down my layers. The benefit to this, of course, is that you're not sitting there trying to get this thing to line up exactly. The other benefit is if you have 20 layers, you can visually see where it's falling in place without having to know what is exactly above or below the selected layer. Now, other things here as well, notice that you can turn off or on the visibility of a layer. So this is helpful, especially when you're working with multiple layers. You can also take an individual layer and you can mask it. Now, here's a huge thing when you're creating composites, because I'm using just basic shapes. But you can imagine how great this feature is if you're trying to morph 2 images together or do some retouching. I have the red square layer selected. I can come down here to the Add Layer Mask button and click on that. And since I had nothing selected, it just gave me a blank mask off to the right. Now, if I click on the left, ta-da, that's active. Click on the right, this is active. Difference, if I click on the left and I start painting, I am actually painting on my layer. Undo, Control Z. If I click on the right and I start painting, I am painting on the mask. Now let's make sure that I switch my colors. X, boop. Come on. And it's thinking about it. There we go. But you can see that what I'm painting is actually turning out to be mask. It's covering up. Wherever my squiggles are is covering up this object off to the left. So if you're familiar with masks such as film masks, wherever it's clear, it's showing through the object. Wherever it's black, it's covering it up. So I can do things such like take a gradient, for instance, and drag a gradient across to fade one image into another. Lots of neat things you can do. Now, just for fun, I am going to browse and take an image in here. So let me go back out and take something from Lesson 8 files, and maybe I'll take this rock star here. And I'm just going to grab the whole thing right now, and in this case, choose 2 up, take my move tool and drag and drop her over here. That's fine. And you have these files if you need them. Now, what I'm also going to do is perhaps I only want a small sliver of this girl, and I'm going to do a really rough selection. And once I have this selection down, I'm going to feather it just a bit so that, there we go, feather it just a bit so that it doesn't look as bad as it really is. So I'm choosing Select, Modify, Feather, and I'll set this for about a 15. Okay, but watch what happens when you have a selection and then you click on the mask button. It automatically builds a mask based upon your selection. The other benefit to this, of course, when you're creating composites, let me move her up so you can see her a little better, is that you can, of course, take your paintbrush, click on the mask, paint black, now I'm making my brush larger, where I don't want the mask. And if I accidentally miss something, hit X and paint white in an area I want to recover. So again, this is such a huge key in Photoshop, but as you're creating composites to make them look a little bit more realistic, you can take advantage of these masks to go ahead and make composites look a lot more realistic. And if you mess up, you can always fix it, which is really great. Now, I'm going to take this a little bit further. I'm going to duplicate this red square layer, and I can do that either by dragging it down to the dog-eared document. I can also do that by simply taking my Move tool and holding down my Alt key and dragging it. So I'll duplicate the green square just for a moment here so you can see that. Hold down my Alt key, 2 arrows appear, and now I have 2. One's called green square copy, and one's called green square. Now I'm going to just throw that out. And I am now going to take the red square, but this time I'm going to hold down the Alt key as I drag it down to the new layer. And now it gives me the opportunity to name this. So I'm going to call this red square top because it's going to end up on the top. And when you create a new layer, it typically does end up on the top of the stack of whatever was last active. If you want to select a new layer and put it on the bottom, you simply select the layer that you want it underneath, and you can hold down your Control or Command key, and it puts it underneath. And of course, you can add the Alt key to that as well. Now, I'm going to take this particular layer, and I'm going to go up and tell it to lock the transparency, just to show you something. And I'm going to turn the visibility off on this one. Notice that I can take my paintbrush now, and I'm going to go back, press D to go to default, and wherever I paint, I can't get out of the lines because preserve transparency essentially says, hey, wherever it's transparent, stay transparent. So I could even come in here and do, just to show you the menu, edit fill, say fill, normal, normally with my black, okay, and I didn't have to do any selection in order to do that. Now let's say that I've actually created this red square out of several layers and I want to consolidate them a little bit. I can also group my layers, and I'm going to go ahead and select both of these layers, and here's the key. If you want to start organizing your layers into separate folders, have them selected ahead of time and then choose New Group from Layers. I see a lot of people create a new group and that creates an empty folder, and then they have to drag their layers into it and then they get all out of order. If I choose New Group from Layers, it neatly packages my layers up. Red square, see if I can spell it right this time, and voila, they're tucked away. So lots of things you can do with layers. Don't forget, you work in layers and you work in the Creative Suite applications. You can keep your files in layers so that you can go back and edit them at any time. And also, if you do need to save out your file in any other form, perhaps you're going to a non-Creative Suite application, you may have to choose to flatten your image. And if you've got space, try to keep your original so you can go back and make editing changes on it.